Hi, I'm Brittany of BZ Art, and I'm here to show you how to make a bat using my bat pattern. Here's a finished example. This is one of my more popular bats and is the designer that I used for my Kickstarter. This pattern has been in need of an update for a while. I sew things a bit differently than I did in the old pattern. In the old pattern, my foot piece was just one piece of felt, but as you can see on the new pattern, I used two pieces of minke sandwiched together. So if you have an old version of the pattern, you can just use the same pattern piece, cut it out twice in minke. The other difference is my back piece is now just one piece. So if you have the old pattern, you can just take two wings and tape them onto the back piece. The third difference is the snout. My snout on these bats is a little bit pointier, and I've increased the length of this middle gusset. This is not a major change, just a minor one, to make these look a bit more like the Kickstarter versions of my bats. Moving on, I'm going to start with the head of my bat. The first thing I'm going to do is sew together two ear pieces. I usually will trace on the exact sewing line and then just cut around it in a big square. I usually also don't even trace this back one. I have on here, but it saves a lot of time to not do that. And the reason I don't use the seam allowance on a lot of this is just because the seam allowance is so big, it can obscure a lot of the detail. So I'm going to go ahead and sew around your ear. And then I'm going to cut off this excess seam allowance. And just as a reminder, there are birds in the craft room. You can probably hear them in the background now. Hopefully they won't scream at us, but they're quite active right now. So I'm just turning the ear right side out. Now you're going to take a headpiece. Just on the gusset here, I usually just cut a slice right down the middle. And, I'm sorry, that's not a gusset, that's a dart. Fold the ear, like so. Set it there. And then sandwich it right in that little dart. Then you're going to sew from here to here, as close as you can to the edge. As you can see, well, hopefully you can see, the ear ends here right on the exact sewing line. It doesn't go up to the seam allowance. I've already done this with the other side of the head. And now we're going to need the head gusset piece, which is in my pile here somewhere. Alright, so just like the dart on the head, I've just cut a line right down the middle. You don't have to be super exact here, and just fold it in half, and then you're going to just sew right along there. We're going to take this head gusset and line up the point with the nose tip of one of the heads. And then you're going to sew all the way around. When you get to this ear, just kind of tuck it back underneath, out of the way of the seam. Sew all the way till you get to this bottom point of the gusset. Cutting off my excess seam allowance again. we're going to repeat this process for this other side, except we're starting at the mark down here and matching it up with the bottom corner of this gusset. When you get to the tip of the nose, you want to make sure you bring these ears all the way to the back of the neck and lay the two head pieces so that they are matching up, and then sew the two head pieces together all the way almost to where you meet these ears. And then I'm going to cut my excess seam allowance again. And this is the step where I usually attach the safety eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and take these tiny little thread scissors and clip two very little holes on the marks for the eyes. Insert the safety eyes from the right side, which is right now the inside. Push the post out. Latch the washer on the back. Repeat this for the other side. Now I like to trim the post off my safety eyes just using a pair of wire cutters. This kind of just helps the eyes lay a bit more flat. Sometimes these posts can get kind of pushed around by the stuffing and make the eyes look funny, or they can kind of bump into each other. It's just a personal preference. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And you grab these ears and pull to turn the head right side out. And now you stuff the head. And I'm just going to use my hemostats to grab bunches of stuffing and kind of push it in place. You want to make sure this nose is nice and stuffed. If you don't, it will turn out looking flat. There. Alright, now you can leave your head like this if you like it, but I prefer to pull the ears up so that you get this nice upright shape and this nice little curve in here, I guess. So I'm just going to put the ears where I want them and pin them. Oh, I stabbed myself. Okay, don't stab yourself. I don't recommend that part. I'm going to take a needle and thread and just do a couple ladder stitches to secure the ear in place. One side done. I'm just going to repeat that same process with the other side. And now your head is done. Alright, so to start with the body, you're going to lay two foot pieces together. And just like I did with the ears, I just cut around these and trace on the exact sewing lines. So you're going to go ahead and sew this up. And then carefully cut around it. And now I'm going to use my hemostats to just turn this foot right side out. First I'm going to pull all of the little toes in, and then I'm going to turn it all the way right side out. I've already done this with the other foot. I'm going to take the front body piece and fold it in half on this dart, and then sew it together. Next, we're going to take the front wing pieces and we're going to clip a few cuts along the seam allowance. Not far enough to cut into the actual wing itself or the exact sewing line. It just gives us a bit more wiggle room to turn this. This is especially important if you're using cotton because cotton's not stretchy. And for this next step, we're going to be sewing these two opposing curves together. So you're going to want this to be able to turn. So you start by aligning it at this top here, at the neck, and sew all the way around. And I'm turning this top wing to match the bottom belly piece as I go. And I'm going to clip the excess seam allowance and repeat this with the other side. Apparently my birds really liked this step because they all just got really excited. It's the same process, I'm just going to start at the bottom instead of the neck. Alright, now we're going to lay this flat. I'm going to take the feet and put them in place on either side of this dart seam and pin them. And then we're going to set aside this front body. We're going to take the back body, and as you can see, it's all just one piece. So again, if you have the old pattern, you would have had a back piece and two wings. These wings are just attached now. So we have this M-shaped dart, and what this is going to do is we're going to sew these like this, and that's going to pull it in, and then we're going to sew the whole thing like this to kind of create the butt. I hope that makes sense. That's the concept here. Instead of using multiple pieces, we're just using darts. So you're going to kind of fold this like that and then sew it up. And clip the excess. And again, just kind of fold it and sew it. And then we fold the whole thing like this. And sew from here to here. And now we've finished the back piece. Now we're going to align this back piece with the front. I'm going to start with one wing, make sure these are all nicely lined up, and then pin. You're going to want to make sure this seam is nice and lined up with this front seam. Alright, so now that these are all pinned together, we're going to start sewing around it. You want to make sure that this butt kind of stays nice and pushed back like this, and that both of these wings are flat against each other. If you're using a cotton or something, you might want to iron it nice and flat on these wings. It's the most important part, because when we're done sewing all the way around it, then we're going to sew a line here and a line here to make this body cavity separate, so that we can stuff it. Alright, so I'm just going to sew all the way around, starting at the neck. And as I go, I'm just tucking this bum underneath here so it doesn't get sewn up in the seams. Whoops. Hope I didn't break the needle. No, it seems fine. That's why pull out pins before you sew over them, because you could potentially shatter your needle, shatter the pin. I've had the sewing needle go through the head of a pin and get stuck. It's just a more dangerous situation. I know some people who do it, but I think they're daredevils. I'm not that brave. Right, you stop when you get to the seam on the neck here. So I'm going to go ahead and check, make sure that I don't have any open seams, and I actually kind of do down here because it wasn't pulled down far enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that. And then I'm going to trim off my excess seam allowance. Right, now we're going to turn the bat right side out. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that all of these little points in this wing get poked out. Right, now comes the part that I was talking about before. So we're going to want to make sure that these wings are nice and flat, and that the bulk of the body is in the middle here. I'm going to turn it right side out. And we're going to use a technique called stitching in the ditch. This is primarily used for quilting, that's where I learned it, but it can be applied for plush making too. So we're going to sew exactly as we can down the middle of this seam. So I'm kind of pulling this to the side so we can get a good look at the seam there. I'm very carefully going to sew down that. It's okay if you get off to one of the sides a little bit, the fluff will help hide it, but in general you want to have a nice hidden stitch there. And as you can see, this is what I'm talking about with the back here. We've made it into essentially a separate little cavity. So we're going to repeat that on the other side. Again, wing is nice and flat. And we've got a little pocket for the body here now, separate from the wings. Right, the next step is to add the detail on the top of the wings. I'm going to take an air-soluble marking pen. This will just disappear over time, or you can use water. And I'm going to mark the detail for the wings. And then we're going to sew along these lines. Now that that's done, I'm just going to go in and clip all these extra threads that are hanging off. And now we're going to fill about half the body cavity with poly pellets. So these are just little plastic beads that help add some weight. You can also use glass beads. And I've even heard of people using like a steel shot. So I have just these nifty paper measuring cups that I put together. This cup is about half of what you're going to need. I don't have an exact measurement for this, I've just been doing it so long. So either way, I just dump one scoop in there. Actually, leave that there. These are gonna kind of go everywhere. I'm just gonna dump them into the body cavity. And try not to make a terrible mess. So yes, that's my super scientific method. If you have an actual funnel, it'll probably go better. It's full to about here, about halfway. Again, these just add weight so that it'll sit up nicely on its own. And then you take normal polyfill stuffing and fill up the rest of the body cavity. Alright, so now you're just about done. You just take a needle and thread and sew the head onto the body. So I start here, right underneath the ear, line that up with this edge, and sew around. And again, I'm just using a ladder stitch. And now I'm going to go around a second time just to make sure it's nice and secure. And you can correct any tilt of your head. For example, if this was tilting too far this way, you could pull a couple stitches tighter that way to help even that out. It's hard to explain, but once you get the hang of it, you can kind of know where to put your stitches to pull the head nice and make any minor corrections. Then when we get back to the beginning, you're going to tie off with a knot. You can always double knot things just for security. Insert into the plush, pull, trim as close as you can, and you are finished with your bat. So now you have a cute little bat. Again, this is one of my more difficult patterns, so that I hope that I explained that clearly to anyone. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. I will do my best to explain. Sewing for me is always a very intuitive process, and my methods change a lot. So when I try to explain this stuff, I'm not always sure that I'm clear. So it really helps when you guys let me know what you think, and so then I can improve in future videos or try to change my terminology, whatever. Sorry, this sounds really awkward, but again, I hope that that was clear, and thank you guys for watching.